Welcome back to EQ Video Tip. I'm your host, Eric Forsetter. We're so excited you're here to join us again for another great episode of EQ Video Tip. Now, at EQ Video Tip, we take top research from EQ authors, writers, and researchers, and we distill that down to you into a quick format that you can consume in about 5 minutes or less, depending on how fast I talk or my co-host, who hopefully will join me, talk as well. We try to give you at least 3 tips each time, and hopefully that will 10x your EQ. So let's get started, and before we do, here are some of the goals of EQ Video Tip. We've got a great show on tap today, and we're going to talk about how to become more likable. In fact, we're going to give you several different ways to become more likable, and this research is actually provided to us by Natalie Kerr, who's a PhD in psychology and wrote an article on 7 ways to become more likable. We won't give you all 7 in these tips, but we'll show you them at the end. Now, have you ever wondered, why does that person have more friends than someone else? Or why do you click with certain people, but others you just can't seem to get a groove going with them? You might think that this has to do with your attraction or interaction with them. And maybe it's something like quick wit, like I have, or all of my hair. But actually the research in psychology tells us it's something else. And it's sometimes a mundane factor, like how often you cross paths with someone, believe it or not. So this research that we're going to go through today talks about practical suggestions for how to become more likable and hopefully meet the fundamental needs for authentic social connections. Let's get into it. Tip number 1, be seen. The more we're exposed to something, the more we just tend to like it. And there's a phenomenon around this. It's called the mere exposure effect. It helps explain things like why we tend to prefer familiar music over new tunes, or why we elect a political candidate with the most media exposure. Sounds pretty simple, right? So how does this relate to us today? Well, what we can do in a work environment that's remote is maybe turn our Zoom camera on or our Chime camera on. Or if you are able to go to an office or see a partner or see friends, we try to do more face-to-face interaction where we interact with each other. Those things will help increase your likability. Now, in short, we want to make yourself visible, but remember, don't be too creepy about it and don't overdo it, because sometimes too much exposure can backfire, evidenced by the fact that you can get really sick of that same favorite song that you've heard over and over and over again, and then eventually you don't want to listen to it anymore. So make an effort to be seen, and hopefully you'll be likable. Tip number 2, ask questions. Be genuinely curious about other people and ask them questions. The research shows that people who ask more questions during a conversation are perceived as more responsive and are better liked in general with their conversation partners. And when you're asking that question, particularly ask good follow-up questions like, what was that experience like for you? That makes it appear that you're actively listening and interested in what that person has to say. So ask a question next time you're talking to someone and help increase your likability. Our third tip, remembering names. It seems pretty simple, but it's something that's really important. Now, remembering someone's name is important because it signals to them that they're important to you. On the other hand, if you fail to remember someone's name or important details about them, it kind of undermines the closeness of that relationship. So a key is to remember their name. The trouble is, and I know I fail at this all the time, remembering someone's name is really tough. I've been in a meeting or at a party and someone says, oh, hey, by the way, meet Sally or meet Joe. And 2 minutes later, I say, oh, I can't remember their name. So one effective research-based way for remembering names is called a retrieval practice. It's called repeatedly pulling that information out of your head. So shortly after meeting someone, retrieve their name. Ask yourself, what's their name? Or use their name during a conversation. So if you just met Sally, you say, Sally, it's nice to meet you. Or Sally, I have a question for you, sort of like the second tip we just did. Make sure that you're personalizing it so that you signal to them that they're important to you. So that wraps up today's show. We hope you enjoyed it. In case you missed it, here are the tips that we covered, as well as the other ones that we missed from Natalie Kerr's 7 ways to make yourself more likable. So that concludes our EQ video tip for today. Try incorporating some of these tips into your daily routine. But remember, use what works best for you and personalize it for yourself. Thank you always to our great research team for providing us with some great tips today. As always on EQ Video Tip, we want to end with gratitude. So thank you for watching. We really appreciate it. Here are some resources that you can use if you want more information on EQ going forward. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thank you.